Do we have Alejandro today?
No, he had to go pick up his mom at the airport.
Okay.
So, I guess that's allowed.
Yeah.
But
Moms, am I right?
I know, right? It's all about the moms. Claudia, since you are already screen sharing, you could go first with the demos. So, I kind of outlined some guidance in Slack about, maybe just like quickly outline what the problem was that you were trying to solve, or the feature you were trying to implement. Give us kind of a quick demo of it working in production if possible. So I think everything's merged at this point, so we should be able to demo in production. And then just kind of, show us the code quickly to show us kind of like where you implemented things and if there was anything interesting about the implementation itself. So
Okay.
You want to go first?
Yeah.
Cool.
So did we end up actually merging your branch, Ethan? Did you do that?
You mean the one I made last night for state?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so something I did, which I probably shouldn't have done, is after I had merged mine and Mindy's branch to master, I ended up making a couple more changes to our story, but I did it on Ethan's fix branch, which I shouldn't have done. So is it okay if I just demo this, because it's got everything that I need? I just need to like merge it to master.
Sure. Yeah. Let's start off with telling us kind of what the problem was that you were solving, you and your pair.
Yeah. So we are trying to add basically like a buy frequency, so people are able to enter an item and that also specify how often that they want to buy it, or how many days after they want to buy it again. So we came up with 3 buttons, soon, pretty soon, and not soon. And I'm not really sure, before I merged it, the buttons were different, where this is like that hover state thing that I was talking about, Ethan, where they are smaller.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I didn't know you meant buttons that you had added. I thought you meant
I
buttons that
didn't. I meant the hover button, or sorry, the get token button originally, but I noticed this happened after we merged too. So I don't know what the deal is with that. We have to look more into it. But anyway, so there's some buttons. So you can select a button. So let's add like pineapple. Select a button and then add item, and then it should go to the database. Just need to check my token. So really so here, items, document, so then it has name, and it also has a number for frequency. And that's pretty much what we did. That's it.
That looks really good.
Thanks.
Yeah. It's it'll be clearer like in a couple of stories, but it's not really the frequency. It's like an estimate of the next time that you're going to buy it. So when we get into like the next round of stories or something, we may want to rename what it's called in the database to more accurately reflect like what it represents. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Okay, so here's our code. Basically everything was an add item. And the buttons we created were radio buttons, and they're down here. So basically with radio buttons, you can select one button and it just holds information rather than like, doing an action. So that's why we went that way. And then we have a frequency here, so basically it sets the frequency constant, and then we go to the database add item function, and we added the frequency on there. And that's it. That's pretty much all that there was to that.
So if eagle eyes might notice line 25 there. Originally it was saving as a string, right?
Yeah, so like if you see in line 9, you state like the original state as string 14, but we actually want to end up saving it as a number. So that's why a quick way to do that in JavaScript is just add a plus sign and then your string, and it'll turn it into a number.
Is there a reason that you're using a string for the initial value? Is that like a radio button thing?
Yeah, so if you go down here, you need, so the value needs to be a string. It won't let you do a number.
Cool.
So that's why.
Yep. Yeah, by default inputs, the values are all strings. So the only like that's, I guess, in production code, to have the little plus and then the variable name might be considered a little bit sort of fragile. Like in this case, it's pretty simple. We have control over all the values and everything, so we know that it's not going to break. But that would actually throw an error if it were something that couldn't be cast to a number. But in this case, I think it's safe enough because we just have the 3 things and they're all, it's like integers, whatever. So
yeah, that's what ended up happening, and that's why I had to redo the code after you had approved it, was because I was setting up state. My original state was being, what was it? Oh, it wasn't 14. It wasn't a number anymore. It was like not soon or something like that. It was still the string, and so it was storing in a database as not a number.
Yep. Cool. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
Can I stop sharing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we'll let Ethan take over.
Cool. Before I do, Claudia, we did a lot of communicating on Slack last night. Did you see the one thing I posted that one test isn't passing, and I think it might be because of this week's stuff?
Yeah, I also, that's one of the other things that I fixed on your branch.
Nice.
I just was assuming that we were just going to push that yesterday, and so that's why I did it.
Yeah, I think Andrew said maybe we'll talk about the state stuff in that branch today, so if we can just end up merging it, that'd be great. Then we'll kind of have some stuff taken care of. Nice. So let me show some stuff. Can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
Nice. So our wiki for this week has our acceptance criteria, which was 2 things. We needed to have 2 tabs are present at the bottom of the app, one for the list view and the other for the add an item view. And the second is that when in the add an item view, a back arrow appears in the header that takes the user back to the list view. So I think we basically broke the week down into 2 sections, which was first we did the list and add buttons. So this is just as soon as you get to your items list after you get your token. So if you were to add something here, then you definitely would recognize the screen. It's just your normal items list screen. You have permanent
I love
buttons.
by the way.
Say again?
I love Wurtworts.
Oh, it's
my
delicious.
Favorite.
Yeah, my German heritage coming through.
I don't know what Wurtworts are.
It's
Is it a real thing?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I just mashed the keys, Claudia, and I typed in Wurt, and it kind of looks like
I don't know.
German
I thought it was
candy.
a German thing.
It sounds like it, right? I don't know. Maybe it is. Yeah. So we have our Wurts now. That's awesome. As far as styling goes, I basically just I was curious if I could kind of make the buttons look the same as they do in our example app. And so that's what they are for now, is just taking up the whole bottom of the screen, clinging to the bottom of the screen, one big button for add and one big button for list. And then the second criteria was to add a back button. So we can navigate to the list from our add screen, but maybe the user is looking for something that's more intuitive, or they just want to make sure, we want to make sure they don't get stuck on this add screen. We also have a back button up here in the corner that takes them to the same place, back to their list. And as far as code implementation, it was basically just two components that I made. I made a nav bar, which is just using links that are taking advantage of the framework that we already set up in the router. So it already knows where they're going. I'm just putting a couple of links in a different place, basically. And the back button is the same thing. It's just another link that's going to the list page. And I just put in a Unicode character for a back arrow to spice it up a bit. And since those are components and this is React, I could just stick them in the existing stuff that we already had, like the fetch items page, which is the list page, and the add items page. So for instance, on the add items page, whenever it returns, it now includes the back button component before all of its different forms, and it has the nav bar down at the bottom after all the other forms that are on that page.
Nice.
Any
Cool.
questions?
Any questions? Yeah. Looks good.
Thanks.
Like it? Yep. Very good. Do we want to, so I guess, yeah, so those, we got through both of the actual issues for the week. So do you want to maybe we'll talk about the lift state stuff?
Yeah, I can go to that branch if you want.
Yeah, let's have a look.
I think it was E. Ethan state tests, not token tests. Yeah. Okay. So I'll just go ahead and start running this. And yeah, so obviously this is the branch that we're hoping to merge into our master soon. And it is basically, unless Claudia added something really different, it's basically just trying to put what Alejandro showed into practice through his cool code sandbox thing. So before, as we were talking about a bit on Slack, it seemed like maybe the logic in our app was working okay. There's just weird stuff about local storage. There were times when it seemed like my computer was absolutely positive that it was whatever, even though I deleted local storage, it wasn't null, it wasn't undefined, it wasn't anything. So I tried to get around that by making a delete button. We can either keep it later and have like start a new list, and use the button in that context, or you could eventually just get rid of the button. But the button clears out the local storage like you would do manually, and it also tries to reset the state. So right now, if we're at our items and we see wort and we don't want wort on our list anymore and we just want to start afresh, we can hit the delete token button. And because it's using state, that automatically takes us, back to the get a new token page, since it recognizes that we don't have a token anymore. And as far as well, what else would you like to see that has to do with that branch?
Well, I mean, that's helpful to see that functionality, because it does, the way it's reacting, I mean, it's reacting. It's pretty clearly, just reacting to the state, which I guess is why the framework's called that. Anyway, but I would like to see the kind of the implementation, just to see where you put stuff. And
so most of the work, I would say, went on in the router. In Alejandro's example, he put a lot of it in the very top level in his app.js, but it seemed like we wanted to keep our app.js as simple as possible, just rendering the router component, and it seemed like this logic made a lot of sense to be in the router component. So the main primary difference was just using useState here. Local storage get item unique token, and unique token is the name of that thing that we've been creating and sticking in the local storage. So now we have the ability to reference useState through the token, I think you would call it just variable, and set token function. And we can just use those all throughout our app now, instead of trying to reference local storage directly. Down here is a very nice bit of code that I think Claudia changed this morning to kind of make it a little bit better. It was it's just showing that if this token, not the token directly in the local storage, but the token variable that's using state, if that is null, then it's going to pick whether it renders the home page or the fetch items. And I think this is just an example of the term of passing down state. From there on, we go to home, and in home we are taking in that same variable and function. And again, we're putting those in the get token. And get token is one level deeper, and it now has access to the token and set token elements of state. Some of the terminology trips me up a little bit. I'm not sure the
and
details
actually,
of what I should call things.
Yeah, when you're passing some variable into another component, that's a prop, not state. Nice. So you're passing props, and you're setting the state at a certain level, but passing in the value as a prop to other components. So it's
nice.
I mean, it's important to use the right terms, but it can be a little confusing for sure.
Yeah. So once we're down to this level, then all of this is props that are referencing back to the state.
So scroll down a little bit. Sir, I thought I saw it still get item. Local storage get item. So it's still set token. Oh, I see.
So set token, I think, is our function that's going to, like, local storage.set item is the basic mechanism that's actually putting something into the local storage, but set token, using that function to get that item after we've stuck it in there, that's what lets us reference state, reference these props, instead of trying to directly reference the contents of local storage.
Yeah, this all looks good. That works for me. You could debate whether the router should have the responsibility of fetching the token and some stuff like that. Like, you might put that in its own component or something, but this accomplishes the job of kind of getting that out of, like I think before it was in multiple places where we were trying to read the token and stuff. It's better to have it in just one place. So, and then pass it down. So that works for me. Stacie, any feedback on that or any kind of thoughts? Or?
No thoughts. It does the job. So I think it's good.
Cool. Nice. So I would just ask you there's a bunch of commented out code and stuff. So just clean it up a little bit, and then.
Definitely just a sketch right now. Work in progress. But
okay. Yeah, I just don't want us to get too behind on the stories for, the kind of on the main line. But,
well, if it looks good to both of you, I'll clean up the comments, and if the rest of it looks good, I'll just push it, merge it tonight to the master, then we'll be good, hopefully.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Nice.
Cool.
Great work figuring that out.
Ethan did an awesome job with this, because we were all trying to figure this out, and we even got on Zoom calls and everything, and we kept getting errors. So just props to Ethan.
He's got it in a nice state, doesn't he? Anyway.
No work for you.
We don't only have moms on this call. We have dads making dad jokes.
You ready to take the screen back over again?
Andrew is the king of dad jokes.
Yeah, that's great.
React
Thanks
dad
so much.
Jokes.
Yeah.
Good job, everyone.
Yeah,
so
well
good.
done.
This is that kind of stuff is really complex stuff to get into, I feel like, when this is your first React thing. So really, really good job. And I hope you learned a lot through that. Alejandro, those examples he was sharing in that video and his code sandbox are all incredible resources. So you should save those somewhere so you can refer back to them later, like I have done.
Nice.
Thanks, Alejandro.
100%. Yeah, wherever you are, Alejandro, thank you.
Cool. Well done. So, and we're doing well for time. So, we're going to do another learning module thing. We're going to talk about pair programming. So, Stacie, do you want to share your screen? Or I can share my screen.
Sure.
Either
Why don't
way.
you share yours? I don't have things pulled up.
Oh, you know, all right. I will do that. That's okay.
I have it on my phone. I could like do this.
Huh. Yeah. Maybe, yeah. Okay. Except now I have people over the top of my controls. All right.
Zoom is so good at being in the way. It's what it's best at.
Oops. Skipping ahead. All right. Here we go. Cool. And we'll share the link to these after the call, or you're welcome to share it now, Stacie, if you want to. But basically, yeah, we'll talk about pair programming. And Stacie, you're going to do the first couple, so you just tell me when to advance the slides.
Sure. Okay. Do you want to kick it off or you want me to? I totally
Go for
can.
it.
No big deal.
Do
Okay.
it. Yeah, you got
Let's talk about pair programming. Hopefully by this point you've like got some experience, so you have a little more context to apply this to. But we basically wanted to talk about pair programming in the sense of how to do it most effectively and how to get the most out of it. So here we go. Next slide, please, Andrew. Okay. Pair programming, traditionally, like at large, is two developers sitting together in front of a computer and kind of passing the keyboard back and forth, working on some kind of programming task. And I really wanted to be sure to highlight these two roles very specifically because I think they get overlooked a lot and they're so crucial to the pair programming experience. So you have the driver who controls the keyboard and is responsible for writing the code. And this person needs to like really talk through what they're doing so that the navigator has a better idea of how to do their role. And then the navigator is the one who's paying really close attention to the code the driver's writing. And they're giving guidance and suggestions and looking things up when things don't make sense and just kind of walking the driver through some implementation ideas, I guess, whereas the driver's doing the details. So these roles are super crucial because I feel like when you're brand new at pair programming, it's really easy to fall into the habit of the driver doing everything and the navigator kind of becoming like a passive passenger who is just kind of watching and not really doing a whole lot. And then you've kind of lost a lot of the benefit of pair programming when that happens. So when you're pair programming, if you can like really keep these roles like at the top of your mind and try and really embody the role and, you know, handle the role in its true nature, I think you're going to have the most effective, productive pair programming session that you can. So pair programming, two people get together, they code things. One is a driver, one is a navigator. Next slide. Okay, done remotely, it's a bit different. Obviously, we aren't sitting in front of the same computer and passing a keyboard back and forth. So the logistics get a little bit different, but essentially it's the exact same thing. It's a driver and a navigator working together to code something. And so the most effective way this, I think, can be done is with this little graph here. And so it starts just hopping on a video or screen share call. This obviously can be done with a number of tools. We use Zoom a lot, but you can also use Slack or Google Hangouts or whatever you choose. But the idea here is that you need to be able to screen share. And it's really helpful when you can see the other person too. Then the driver is the one who's going to share their screen and do the coding. And as we said before, the navigator is providing feedback and asking questions. And in this step too, there are like endless approaches that you can take to pair programming. So I definitely suggest exploring those and seeing what works best for you and your pair programming partner. And it's likely that whenever you start pair programming in your job, it'll look even different there. But hopefully by that point, you'll have some nice little bits to bring to the table about what's worked for you. After you do the coding down in the lower right, the driver is going to push their code up to the remote repo and the navigator is going to pull it down. And then you move on to the next step, which is just swapping roles and doing it all over again. And this swapping roles part should not be overlooked and is crucial because you get so much benefit from being the driver and so much benefit from being the navigator. And you really use different skills in each of those roles. And so if you don't get the chance to do one or the other, then you're really missing a big piece of what pair programming provides as benefit and learning opportunities. So do make sure that you are making that switch. That can be like, if you have an indefinite amount of time to pair, you can say, let's wrap this thing up and then switch. Or you can say after 20 minutes, we're doing a hard switch. We're going to push up the code and flip. Or you can do things like some people will do what's called ping ponging, where one person will write a test and the other person will write the code. So you can kind of switch in that sense, but make sure the switching happens. Super important. Next slide.
All right, cool. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about kind of the mindset, the attitude that helps with kind of effective pair programming. So I think of it as an exercise in sharing your Lego. So, you're a little kid, you have your Lego, and, like you really love your Lego, and you have, like, kind of have in mind what you're going to build out of your Lego. For me, it's usually like spaceships and stuff. And kind of hard to like share the Lego because like, oh, that's the piece that I wanted to do this thing with. But it's something that I heard a long time ago and kind of in my programming career is that rather than like if you're pairing with somebody, it's really easy to do what's called bike shedding and kind of get into arguments about like, well, what's the most efficient way to do this thing or whatever, and kind of go back and forth. And all of a sudden 20 minutes or half an hour has gone by of just arguing about the thing. It can actually be more efficient to say, you know what, let's try your way. And it's actually going to take probably less time to actually code the solution that the other person was suggesting. And then you find out whether it works. And if it doesn't work, you can kind of come back to your idea. So just, I guess, like the biggest thing for me about pair programming is just being kind of open, like this beginner's mind concept of, there's doubt and possibility, and it's all like just kind of embrace that and just kind of approach it in a way where, where you're just kind of open to doing things differently than you might if you were just doing it by yourself. It's not really about teaching or mentorship. It's about getting something done. But it is still an opportunity to learn from each other because everyone brings something different to programming, a different background. You might know a different part of the system a little bit better than the other person or whatever. It's a chance to share that and to learn it. Like in general, I would ask drivers to seek agreement before proceeding. So, okay, we've talked about it a little bit. I'm going to do it, and I think I'm going to try to do it this way. And are you cool with that? And then the person's like, "Yep, go for it." And then you do it, as opposed to, if you start to kind of go out, do too many things without seeking that agreement, then you drift apart as a pair, right? So on the converse, navigators should do a lot more question asking than telling. Unless the drivers, hey, can you find out the answer to this thing, and you tell them the answer. I mean, that's one thing. But in general, can you explain why you want to do it this way, or explain that line of code I don't quite understand, looks kind of tricky or something. So seek agreement before proceeding and ask more than you tell. And all those things are kind of a long way of saying, like, just kind of come into it with low ego, like don't come into it with a preconceived idea and try to push it through and all that kind of stuff. Oops. There we go. So you've both, since we only have two of you on the call, but you both have paired now with everybody else in the group. So I'm just kind of curious to hear what we've talked about in terms of this approach and everything. Like, how does that line up with your experience of pair programming so far?
Well, I think it's really helpful to have those guidelines because we didn't really know exactly what we were doing other than being on a call for an hour.
Right. Yeah.
And just doing whatever, and trying to solve the problem. Mm-hmm. So, and it's been awesome, but I think it's really good to have these guidelines to be more successful.
Do you feel like it'll be a little bit more focused or something now?
Yeah. And I feel like we can probably get more out of it as far as like learning from each other.
Yeah.
Did you have?
The part that stood out the most to me was being very intentional about switching navigator to driver roles. So I think up to now, part of my impulse was just, well, if it seems like one person is good at kind of doing, I didn't have the names, but kind of the driver and one person kind of the navigator, well, then just let them do that the whole time. And it makes a lot of sense to switch, because obviously the point of this isn't so much whether it's what you're naturally good at. It's more like making room for more creativity to come in, or to shake things up so that you have to look at the problem in a different way.
Yeah, and the ego thing.
Oh, go ahead.
The ego thing that you brought up is a good reminder, like that you're not pair programming so you can show up your skills.
Mm-hmm.
You're just more doing it, to work as a team to solve a problem. So that's a good
for
reminder.
sure.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm curious if since we didn't give you a ton of guidance to start about how to pair program, any of these things kind of come up? Like, did you naturally fall into any of the things here, or were there areas where you really didn't do it the way we were kind of describing?
I think Stacie is the one who mentioned possibly doing tests, and like one person writes the failing test and the other person tries to implement the code. Mindy and I fell into that. So I think that was just from her experience before. She was almost driving the fact that she could be the driver and I could be the navigator, or that kind of thing. That's been a part of my experience so far, for sure.
Yeah, from my experience, it's been what Ethan said about whoever has the skill or has the knowledge or has the idea is the one that drives and codes, and then the other person just either Googles or backs them up, or
Yeah, for me, I feel like. Go ahead.
Oh, no, go for it.
I was just gonna say, for me, I feel like in at least 9 out of 10 cases, I'm the one who knows less and just kind of trying to keep up. So if the driver is actually like intentionally making themselves put everything into words, then I know I will get twice as much out of that, because it's for any of us, once we get caught up in that we have an idea, if we are driving, then it's so tempting to just write everything you can think of without explaining any of it and see if it works, but then the other person kind of has to wonder what you were thinking.
Yeah, I think that it's hard to speak for myself, but I think that the other people everybody else that I've been pair programming with has done a good job of answering questions, and like I felt comfortable asking like, what are you doing, and like not like getting a good attitude and explanation from them.
Yeah, that's true too.
Nice. Yeah, I know, when I was kind of actively a developer, there was one place where I worked where we really did a lot of pair programming, and it was probably the hardest part for me was there were times when I was the navigator for a long time, and it was really hard to kind of understand like even what I was supposed to do when I was the navigator, and to kind of like keep engaged and keep focused and all those kind of things. So I think now I see the value of the navigator role a lot more. Like it's you can really be asking kind of, I mean, there's a bunch of ways to approach it, and it's kind of depending on your experience. It's sometimes it's just helpful to ask naive questions about like what's like how like what approach are you even using, why would that be a good way to solve this problem. If when you have a little bit more experience, it's actually you could ask the exact same question, but it might be with a little bit different intent. There are kind of like higher level ways to architect things, and particular architectures are good at different things, and so you might be saying like, well, at the scale we're running, maybe this architecture is not going to kind of keep up with demands 6 months from now. It might be better to do it this other way. Like you can kind of challenge each other a little bit, but it's I think in any case, like it's I think it's possible to be contributing just as much as a navigator as the driver. The driver is, like Stacie was saying, is pretty in the weeds and trying to like actually get actual code written down to kind of make something work, and the navigator thinking of like, how does this fit into the rest of the program, and some of those kind of higher level things.
Yeah, I definitely like the idea. I know I kind of already said this, but the idea of switching for that purpose, I think it's almost like using two sides of the brain or something, and it would probably help me a lot in the same way that it helps to explain a problem. It would help me a lot to think that I understand the problem, and then also get to sit back for a minute and see how the other person solves it, to see that there might be such a way that I wouldn't have even thought of at all, where you can attack it from a different side.
Yep,
Totally.
sure.
The switching has been like so like I love the switching, and the switching has to happen. But what has been like eye-opening for me is that I'll be a navigator and I'll like be looking at the code that's being written. I'll be like, yeah, that all makes sense. It makes total sense. What you're saying is perfect. Great. And then I go get into the code and I'm like, I don't actually know what's here at all, because it's like wildly different when it's on your screen and you're trying to add things to it or kind of like work around it than it is when you're seeing somebody else do it. Like, especially when that person is like really confident, you're like, yeah, we're doing great. And then it's on my screen and I'm like, I don't know what this is anymore. And so switching gives you like a new opportunity to like understand the code and feel more confident and on like a deeper level. So switching.
Yeah. I guess if you're pair programming with someone that is more advanced or just knows more about something, it almost might feel like watching a tutorial, which I know usually is not like the best way to learn, because everything seems so easy when you're watching it.
Man, that's exactly what I was going to say. It is so, I think they call it the curse of wisdom or something. The feeling that because you overviewed some information, you now could put that information into practice. And then whenever you try to, you see how different it is. And that's such a thing with learning coding and doing the tutorials and thinking all this makes sense, and then realizing that you have to Google to remember every individual line that was written.
Totally. You got to get the strokes in.
They're not your muscle memory. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Cool. We also have some links to articles that we found as we were kind of researching exactly what to present and everything. So like I said, we will post the link in the Slack. I'm kind of actually curious whether, like, so now we've done 2 learning modules. We did the one on code reviews first, and then we did this one on pair programming. Do you feel like that was the right order to do these in, or would it have been better to switch the order of the 2?
I think.
Question for
what did you say the first one was again?
We did the one on code reviews,
Right.
and then this one, yeah. What were you gonna say, Claudia?
I think code reviews was the good one to start with, because I feel like we all were pretty confused about that. Or maybe if you want to do this one first, because that would be useful too, maybe to at least give some like more guidance on code reviews. Just maybe like not in like a, this learning module format, but more like just I don't know, whatever other way, written way.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if we should do maybe something, just a little bit, in the kickoff or something, like kind of talk about it a little bit more. Like we do say, like, you're going to be pair programming and stuff. We don't give a lot of like how-to in that. So
I'm not sure. I personally have a preference, but the other side of it is sometimes it's kind of good to be like thrown in the water and you have to teach yourself how to swim, like if you had just told me this stuff off the top, I might have not had any opinions on it, or I would have just thought it was all obvious and not even worth saying. But now that I've had the experience of this went well, this didn't go well, I was trying to get to this point, but we didn't really, manage to do that. I think this stuff is probably more informative to me now.
okay, cool, good, all right, excellent, good job, everybody. I'm actually 2 minutes ahead of schedule.
Yes.
So.
I like having the role of navigator and driver laid out too, because it kind of gives you permissions to do the things that you maybe weren't doing before. Like navigator should ask tons of freaking questions. Well, it's like before you're kind of like, I'm just going to pretend I understand everything. But when you come at it like, no, this is what the navigator does. This is my role. I'm going to ask questions, even if they seem ridiculous, because that's my job. So it's like, I got permission now to do it. So I like having the defined roles.
Yes, and the navigator shouldn't be dictating code to the driver also.
Yeah, right. At that point, you should just switch driver, right? If somebody like really has an idea of the specifics of what they want to code. Yeah.
It's good too, though. I feel like as a navigator, when you do when the driver is like, I don't know how to do that, because it does cause you to like actually think through every character of code you're writing and why it should even be there, which I feel like is one of those things that like you kind of overlook when you just see somebody flying through the code. You're like, oh, right, squiggly line, dash, variable. And then, but when you like have to actually say, okay, I need you to start with a curly brace, and then we're going to put, you know, our variable here. We're going to put in whatever, you know, all the details. It's like a new way of like more deeply understanding syntax.
I think
Anyway, that's all.
that's so true. Like, it's like you could read the documentation or watch a tutorial. Each one has a different tier of how much you can learn it. But if you actually have to tell someone the exact thing they have to do, it really is crazy to me what a difference it is.
Yeah, you might not have to copy and paste it anymore.
Maybe. Have it
But it's
built
okay
in
if you
already.
do.
All right, I'm going to stop recording. Great job this week, everybody. Nice job.